Hi everyone, my name is Jeremy Dalton and I take care of the virtual reality and augmented reality team for PwC UK. And I'm also the author of a book called Reality Check. And this book covers everything about XR for business and is aimed at business leaders around the world. In both of those job roles, I help organizations understand the value of XR technology, how it can be used and why it is so powerful, and also I try to dispel the myths around the technology itself and help people to better understand its usage. Today, I'll be talking to you about the use of XR technology in industry, particularly in the UK, although we'll bring some US figures into it as well for comparison later on. And I'll run you through two major analyses that we've conducted at PwC so far. The first is an analysis of the UK XR startup ecosystem. And this was conducted a few years back in partnership with Digital Catapult and Immerse UK, both part government funded entities. And the Digital Catapult's remit is to help grow the UK's digital economy. Immerse UK is a networking group of cross-sector individuals in the academic world, as well as the enterprise world. And they are ultimately charged with helping to improve collaboration within the immersive industry in the UK. And we worked at PwC with our two partners there to try and understand what the current ecosystem in the UK was like back then. So we did a very manual analysis where we gathered data from what we could find out there from lists that we had been gathering and put it all together, and we came across almost 500 unique companies in the XR space in the UK. We analyzed them by their maturity. So you can see there on the pie chart on the bottom right-hand side, starting with micro companies, startups, scale-ups, and then established companies. There's a good mix there, but the vast majority of organizations were classified as startups. So startups is something a little bit more than a micro company, which might be, one individual or two individuals with no revenue yet, but less than a scale up that has perhaps been given seed funding, or an established company that has offices all around the world and is well established, has a number of employees, has been revenue generating for many years now. So there was a good split there. It was pretty clear that there was a lot of startup companies that were able to come through the pipeline. There was a strong pipeline of XR organizations that could be built from back in 2017. In terms of the split you see with the pie chart on the left-hand side, we split these organizations into three types of company: content, technology, or service. And by that, I mean, if you are a content XR company, that means you are creating content. You don't necessarily have any unique IP or technology, but you are helping to build the content that will fit onto those platforms. As a technology provider, you would either be someone that builds manufacturers' hardware, potentially builds software platforms, which a lot of the content is hosted on, and finally, and creates middleware solutions as well. On the service side, this is around organizations that provide some kind of service, not a physical product or an intangible good like software, but something akin to headset rentals, consultancy, legal work, fundraising, anything like that in the XR space. And then finally, the last bit of information here, which is like an executive summary of this analysis. You'll see the venture capital funding received by city. And what we mean by that is when an XR company has been registered in a certain city, it receives different funding. It receives different funding levels there. So the large majority of companies that received funding were registered in London. You can see there, $646 million. But these figures have moved on since then, but some aspects remain, such as key hubs in the UK, especially in London. It's pretty clear from further analyses that London, for example, has retained its status as a major hub in the UK XR space. So a few years later, the Immersive Economy in the UK report in 2019 reported that there are currently around 1,250 active immersive specialist companies in the UK. And what they mean by that are organizations where the majority of their revenue are coming from immersive related activities, which is absolutely fantastic to see, and really strong growth from the 2017 figures we saw previously. So that's a little bit about the supply side. So in other words, the startups that are out there, the ecosystem that is out there, that is supplying goods and services within the immersive market. But let's talk more about the demand side from organizations that are actually using this technology right now. To try and answer this question, we looked at 7.2 million UK and US businesses for publicly available data on where they have been using XR technology in a commercial sense. So we analyzed things like their websites. We looked at their news articles, social media postings, annual reports, and other sources that were publicly available. We used a natural language processing algorithm that helped to understand where keywords were used, specific keywords like virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, spatial computing, and so on. We gathered those up and then we filtered it to understand whether the companies were actually using the technology themselves or whether they were simply talking about the technology. And every time we found a correct result, we connected it to an industry, a geography, a technology, and a use case. So from left to right, by technology, I mean virtual reality or augmented reality. By geography, within the UK, we have our own set of provinces or regions, and you can see them listed here. In the US, we analyzed the results by state. In terms of industry, we created a taxonomy you can see in the third column here. And this is very much it should be a well understood taxonomy. It's not wholly conclusive. Of course, there will be lots of other subsectors, but we felt this was high level enough to provide a useful overview of the XR ecosystem in the UK from a demand perspective. And then finally, by use case, what I mean is application. So in other words, applications of the technology like entertainment and leisure, healthcare, learning and development, process improvements, product and service development. These are areas where virtual reality and augmented reality are useful. So we needed some buckets or groups to be able to categorize them. And these were the ones that we chose. They are loosely aligned to the Seeing is Believing report. And if anybody is interested in that, you can see that analysis. That's beyond the scope of this particular presentation, but it is an analysis that we had done previously, which looks at the economic impact of XR globally, including in the UK, in the US, in Japan, in Finland, in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates, and a few other places around the world. And what we found there is that XR is expected to contribute $1.5 trillion to the global economy by 2030. So big numbers there. And we've also split it by use case, very similarly to how we've done here in this analysis. So digging into this analysis a little bit more, we have got some results here around the technology side of things. So we found that virtual reality accounts for the majority of XR applications in both the UK and in the US. So in the UK, virtual reality is being used a little bit more, representing almost 2/3 of all the examples that we found. In the US, augmented reality is a little bit more mature, representing about 37% of all use cases, equivalently virtual reality representing about 63% of all examples discovered. Throughout this analysis, by the way, you'll see a link here to the full details. If you want to check it out, you can actually categorize the data in your own way. You can choose different use cases. You can choose different regions in the UK. So head to pwc.co.uk/XR and industry if you want to see more details on this. But this presentation will present you with an executive summary, at least, of what is going on in this analysis. Next, when we come to adoption by industry, some very interesting results here. Engineering and manufacturing is leading the way in quite a big way in both the UK and the US. It has a very sizable lead in the UK, being about 13% above its the industry coming second, retail and consumer. And in the US, things are a little bit closer. Engineering and manufacturing actually represents about 6% more than the second highest adoption industry, which is technology. Now, if you look at both the UK and the US, apart from engineering and manufacturing, it's fairly reasonably split amongst the rest of the four industries within the top five. So you can see a fairly equal split there, plus or minus about 2%, 3% at most, between retail and consumer, professional services. Sports and leisure appears only in the UK in the top five, but healthcare is shared by both the UK and the US as well, in addition to retail and consumer and professional services. And finally, it's healthcare shared. Sports and leisure appears in the UK, but not the US in the top five. When it comes to applications of the technology, the top three are actually the same across the UK and the US. So we have consumer engagement as an application area. We have learning and development and entertainment and leisure. Those are the top three from the UK perspective. In the US, it's learning and development first, consumer engagement second, and entertainment and leisure third. Learning and development being a very interesting area because there are vast applications of the technology when it comes to L&D. And you can see there in the US, L&D represents about a quarter of all use cases. In the UK, the sizable chunk that you can see here, 38% of all use cases are relating to consumer engagement. So in other words, some way of communicating information to consumers or end users in a way that helps them understand a product better, helps them to improve their knowledge of a product so they can make a better informed decision about what to buy and when. And from the supplier's perspective, hopefully reduce costs, reduce the reliance on retail and brick and mortar channels in the retail and consumer industry, for example, and ultimately communicate the word about products and services in a more effective manner. In terms of regional adoption of this technology across the UK and the US, we've got some interesting results here, which are aligned to what you saw in the previous analysis. In the UK, which is represented by the pie chart at the top of the screen here, the biggest chunk, or the leader in terms of a region that is adopting XR technology, is London, with about a third of all examples that we could find in the analysis of XR. Equivalently, almost the same amount in the US. We've got a third of all use cases here, applying to California as a state within the US. And not all states are included here. We've, just for the sake of being able to read this pie chart properly, we've only included states where the adoption of XR technology was above, or represented an amount above 4% of the results there. So you can see in second place in the US comes New York at nearly 20% of the results. And in the UK, in second place comes the Southeast. Now, all in all, the number of applications that we found as a result of this analysis ranged in the thousands. So in the UK, we found 1,550 examples of XR usage. Now, it's important to remember that that is not unique companies. We'll come on to that in a second. In the US, we found almost 2,200 examples. Those are actually minimum figures, indicating there's even greater potential for XR here. And the reasons are threefold. Firstly, only publicly available information was analyzed. So in other words, if a company was using XR technology but didn't talk about it very loudly online, then their efforts and their projects were not included in this analysis because of the methodology and our approach in analyzing publicly available data. Secondly, any direct-to-consumer applications were actually excluded from the analysis. So when it came to companies that were selling directly to consumers and not going through a business channel, those weren't included in the analysis here. And then finally, all of these figures represent a snapshot view in time from mid-2020, so just about 12 months ago. When this analysis was conducted. And as we all know, with the speed that things are moving in the XR industry, things have moved on, will have moved on even more so since then. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you a little bit of a view of the back end here so that you can understand what we're looking at. So you should be able to see the more detail about the results I just spoke about on the screen. So this is how it looks from our dashboard. We've got the two countries here that were analyzed, the UK and the US. You can see a heat map of the application areas or the examples. London there in very dark, representing a higher number of examples. California also very dark colored there. Same thing over there. In total, there were 3,748 recorded and audited examples of XR technology being used. And that was over a total of 2,589 unique companies. So what that means is that a number of companies were using XR technology in multiple ways. So one company may have been using it for virtual reality as well as for augmented reality purposes. So perhaps they were using VR for training and maybe augmented reality to improve a process or to provide more effective remote assistance, for example. And you can see here all the companies being shown, and we actually have the ability to put a tooltip on here, raise it, and then actually see more details about how this company is using the technology. What I'll do very quickly in the last minute that I have is I'll also give you a little bit of a preview about how the UK, one of the UK government funding programs is doing with regard to XR funding. So this is publicly available information, but it's presented to you here in a more and easier to understand fashion. This actually represents, but this represents all of the funding that has come from Innovate UK. And this is the UK government's innovation agency. What you're seeing here is the funding that went to different organizations registered in different places in the year 2005, 2006, which is when records began for this exercise. And you can take it all the way up to the latest competition year, 2020, 2021. And you can see the vast difference there. A lot of improvement in activity around funding across different technology areas. So this doesn't actually include only XR, but also includes artificial intelligence, blockchain, data analytics, and drones. But if you want to look at XR specifically, you can do that and filter down. And you can see a lot of areas here where the technology is being used. And in particular, London again is shown to be a key area, along with the southeast of the UK. Although there is also some activity you can see here in the northwest, very significant activity. But the key message to take from all of these different analyses is that the UK, wherever you are, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northwest, Midlands, London, Southeast, Southwest, there is investment going on in XR technology. There is adoption of the technology. There are startups involved in the technology. And there is ultimately a range of different activities all across the country. Thank you all for listening to this presentation. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can find my website at jeremydaltonxr.com. That has all my social media details and links to these analyses and other reports that we've got publicly available for free if you want to check those out.